Hi, everybody. It's Mr. Gray here. This is kind of a big preview before back to school night. Back to school night is so short, and there are some things that I really want to go over for the school year at back to school night that I want to make sure you're kind of in person for. But there's lots of things that we won't have time to go over that I'd love to just kind of go over here. It's a lot of like the nuts and bolts of the academics, what happens in class, like what's the plan. And those are things that are a little easier to say here than to go over really carefully at back to school night. So there's going to be a lot of information here. It's going to be pretty boring in the sense that it's just written down in bullet points, but I really wanted to give you a good look at what's happening in class the whole year. And that way you'll be able to ask questions at back to school night, at conferences, or just to email me anytime to kind of go over what's going on in class. Speaking of back to school night, it's going to be Thursday, this coming Thursday from 6:40 to 7:20 in P4 in the classroom. That's parents only that night. And I have a lot to go over. I hope you can make it. I'd love to see you there. So before we get into all the things I want to talk about, I want to kind of paint this picture about the infinite staircase. This is just an idea of the students and on their journey through fifth grade and throughout school. So the staircase is infinite in the sense that once they take a step up, there's another step up, and then there's another, and then there's another, and it never ends. So we're never quite satisfied with, I did this. I was able to identify the theme in a book like a fifth grader, I'm done. I'm able to identify the theme as a sixth grader, I'm done. It's this idea of building and building and building. That's really our goal. So keep that in mind as I'm talking about all those things. It's not just a list of things simply to check off. It's the things we're going to focus on as we're moving up, both in a large sense in reading in general and in a more narrow sense, like in a specific idea about reading. So let me start with reading. The big units we're going to go over focus on genres. We'll stay focused in one genre at a time. And within that genre, we'll look at all sorts of different things. Our first one is about like interpretation book clubs. The kids will be in partners more than in full clubs at this time of the year, but we might get to that a little bit. But, you know, one of the main things we're looking at is focusing on identifying, communicating, and discussing themes in books. So again, it's not this idea of I found the theme in the story, but we're able to communicate about them, discuss them, make connections from one theme in a book to a theme in another book, from a theme in a book to a theme in a movie, to themes that happen out in our real life. So it's this growing idea about themes. I'm not going to talk about every single unit, but that just kind of gives you like an idea of what we're doing. So that's like the big idea. And then, of course, within that, we're going to be talking about characters and character development, setting and the role it plays, how plots move in a book, and even the author's point of view and the author's craft. So there's a lot happening within each of these, but these are kind of the overarching ideas. After we do interpretation book clubs, we'll do a unit called Argument and Advocacy, which focuses on nonfiction, and we'll look at books, videos, articles, stories during that time, and the kids will have debates. One example of a debate is, should we focus more on outer space exploration or underwater exploration? So this will happen individually and with little teams, and we'll have official debates, and kids will have to do research and make a debate plan and actually have full debates in our class that are organized. And so it's really fun, but it'll give you an idea of kind of how that works. We'll also have a unit about historical fiction. We'll do American Revolution book clubs, and then fantasy at the end of the year. And we'll have some more things sprinkled in there as well. There'll also be read alouds that happen throughout the year. My goal is that the kids are hearing me read to like show what expressive reading looks like. And then also, you know, I'll be matching a lot of what's happening with what we're studying in the read aloud. So as an example, when we're studying theme in reading, I'll be reading out loud a book called The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane. And like I can highlight the really important themes because they're really obvious in that book. As a way, it's like another way to show you how to study theme. And so we're kind of attacking it from all angles if possible. I have some planned read alouds this year. We might not get to all of these. Some might get substituted, but just to kind of give you an idea. So right now I'm already reading The Wild Robot out loud. And by the way, it's okay if students have read these before or even heard it as a read aloud before, because you get another experience. Also, sometimes we hear from students, I read that in 3rd grade, but you're a different person in 5th grade than 3rd grade. And so there's lots of value even if we had read these books. So The Wild Robot, The Miraculous Journey of Edward Sirlane, Bridge to Terabithia, A Wrinkle in Time, Number the Stars, An American Revolution book, and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe when we study fantasy. It would be a huge achievement if I was able to get through all of those, but that's kind of the idea or the plan. We'll also do novel studies. So that's going to be very quick. We'll often do a novel study in a week or a week and a half, and we're trying to preview a unit. So we'll read Home of the Brave right before we do these interpretation book clubs, and it will really kind of get everyone centered on some big ideas that we're going to go over. So I'll focus on a few things that as the kids are reading, they're focusing on and working on showing their thinking in their reader's notebook. But then that will match kind of the work we're doing later. It's just going to set them up so they're able to be thinking about the reading and the strategies that we're using and the things that we're learning, not the work. It's all going to be set up ahead of time. So novel studies that are planned this year, again, we might not get to all of them. Some might get substituted. Home of the Brave, Tuck Everlasting, Freak the Mighty, A Single Shard, The Girl Who Drank the Moon, and When You Trap a Tiger. And so there's some more that could get in there. So we'll see how it goes. Like I said, in reading, the kids will have a reader's notebook. Most of their day-to-day work will happen in there. So that'll be something I'm giving examples of, like what kind of thing I'm looking for, whether that's using Post-its for a specific idea, whether that's making a table of predictions, all sorts of things like that. So they'll have to do that work on their own for practice. They'll have to do that work to turn in for a grade, and they'll have to do that work potentially even as an assessment with their own book. So a lot of times the kids, I'll be teaching maybe from a certain book or giving certain ideas, but the kids will be reading the books of their choosing in the genres, but they'll still have to do the work that we're all practicing together. So they'll have readers' notebooks for a grade. They'll also have some work to do with groups or from a novel study for a grade. They will have assessments based on stories they haven't read. They'll have to do some of the work we've been practicing. These are a little bit pulled away from just straight comprehension questions. They're going to actually have to do some of the strategies that we worked on in order to show that they've been practicing this on their own. The kids will have partners often. There'll be lots of discussion and then one-on-one conferences with me. So as you can imagine, there's a lot happening with reading throughout the year. In writing, the writing units that we're doing where the kids are writing will match really closely with the reading units. So for example, very early in the year, the kids are studying literary essays, and they're literary essays at the same time we're reading about theme. So that in that way, the things are matching. They're going to make an essay about a theme that they are reading about. So reading and writing will be quite closely related throughout the year. We'll start with narrative craft and literary essay, a research-based argument essay happening at the same time as debates, memoir, bringing history to life, fantasy. The focus is going to be on the writing process where kids write and write. Every day we meet for writing, the kids are going to have an extended time to write. And that's really where that practice comes in, where they're not just putting together a plan and writing it and being done. They're going to write and revise and rewrite. And then they'll finally edit and publish those documents. They'll also work in partners. They have a writer's notebook. Most of the writing they do will happen by hand in their writer's notebook. And then they'll publish on on the computer on a document. We'll use mentor texts and rubrics. The mentor texts will be so kids can see expert writers and what the choices they make and how they do it, and we'll study that and they'll try to incorporate that in their own writing. We'll use rubrics so the kids can see how they're doing, even grading themselves and making a plan. The goal is always, in the same way as like the infinite staircase, is lifting their level and being your own job captain. We want the kids to start looking at their own writing and the teaching that I'm doing and their resources and say, okay, based on that, how can I do better? How can I lift my own level? And what things do I need to do to make that happen? And so we want to give them a lot of ownership in their writing, but they will do a lot of writing throughout the year. In addition to that, we'll do some language work. which will be taken from different things, but we'll do vocabulary and grammar and spelling. The kids will work as individuals and teams, and they will have to, have assessments and answer questions about how to use the correct vocabulary or what is the correct grammar or spelling, but they'll also work together, and really it's going to be focused on creation. So not just multiple choice questions, but creating sentences that use a semicolon in a specific way, or using their vocabulary words in their writing. So that's going to be how language goes. For maths, not a typo, all different kinds of math. So we all sometimes refer to it as maths. But our 5th grade units are operations and algebraic thinking, decimals, fractions, measurement and data, and geometry. And you can see a little more information about that on the slide and some examples. We are in 5th grade and we'll focus on the 5th grade units, but we'll use these as a springboard to look at more kinds of math. We'll also do Continental Mathematics League. We'll practice that in class. So every month or every couple months, we'll take a whole week and just focus on Continental Mathematics League type problems where they are more difficult and involve different types of problem solving. And the kids will hear strategies from me on how to solve the problems, and they'll work together to try to get better in that area. And a few times this year, they will actually take a test. Everyone in the class will take a test. There's 6 questions. They have 30 minutes to do it, and we'll upload the scores, as a class with students that are playing all over the world the same thing. So that's really fun, and it's a great way to get these really difficult problems and to try to do them. There's no big consequences. It's not an expectation or really part of your grade that you do it, except we may include a part of your grade where you redo problems that you got incorrect occasionally. We'll also do projects throughout the year. A few that we did last year that were big hits were the stock market game, the iPhone upgrade project, which should be coming out pretty soon, and then volume robots. And you might hear about other projects as well. Other challenges we'll do throughout the year are small ones. Maybe we'll use as warm-ups, Yohaku, Sudoku, logic puzzles, and even more math puzzles. And then finally, the big thing that we're focusing on in math is thinking, communicating, and working like a mathematician. We're going to value precision and accuracy over time. We want kids to be able to discuss different strategies, look at math in a different way, and not simply speed through something. Speed is great. We want kids to be able to solve problems quickly, also efficiently, but to be able to really understand and communicate about the math in addition to that is going to be a big focus this year. In social studies, I'm going to let you kind of read through the different units we're doing, but in social studies, we start in 1491. So we imagine the Americas and what Native American tribes were like just before Columbus came. And then throughout the year, we'll kind of make the connection between pre-Columbus Native Americans all the way to modern day Native Americans. And then we'll focus on the age of exploration after Columbus, what was happening in Europe, and how did this giant network between Europe, the Americas, and Africa grow? Like what happened there? What were people's motivations? Things like that. And then also looking at all the different countries that were involved. Then we'll move our focus to the colonies. So we'll start to look at how all these different nations had conflict and cooperated in the Americas after Columbus in the 1600s and 1700s. By the way, we'll get all the way to the early 1800s, but most of the year is focused on this idea of conflict and cooperation, and then the new United States. After we look at conflict and cooperation, we'll look at colonial America, how people lived, early democratic ideas, and the introduction of slavery. And we'll also have a day focused on colonial life called Colonial Day. That should be right before we leave for a break in December, but you'll hear more from me about that later. After we look at colonial America, we'll look at the road to revolution. So we're in like the 1750s, 1740s, 1750s. We're laying the groundwork for revolution, and we'll see what the tension was between the British colonies in the United States and Britain. And we'll take a long time to talk about the Declaration of Independence and really the important people at that time. We'll take a few weeks in the spring to look at the most important battles and turning points in the American Revolution and the important people. And then we'll look at the new United States government with a big focus on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the fundamental principles of American democracy. And it's a perfect year for that because it will be an election year next year. So that will really be a heightened thing to be looking at next year. And then finally, at the very end of the year, we'll talk about westward expansion, what happens after the Constitution has been written, and how the United States starts to move west. Also throughout the year, we'll look at lots of primary sources, projects. We'll do National History Day. That's going to be a project we do in class, but not something required to be submitted unless you want to. We'll look at the location and current 50 states and their capitals and more. And we'll also, you might hear about the Great State Project and other projects throughout the year. We'll also take some time, a few days a week, to watch CNN 10. It's something you can look up. It's a 10-minute news program. They do a fantastic job of looking at world events really quickly. And really, it's just a jumping off point for kids to discuss what's happening in the world. We know that they have big opinions about what's happening in the world, and I want to give them a chance to discuss them, think about them, talk about them in a safe place. Science. So there's two things happening in science. There'll be science work that we do in class, and the kids go to science lab with Mr. Marco 2 days a week. So these are the big units. What is matter made of? How do matter and energy move through an ecosystem? Why do some places lack fresh water, and what can we do about to protect it? And what patterns do we notice when we observe the sky and the stars? So we'll do a little bit in class that will match what's happening in Mr. Marco's science lab. We'll have a shared gradebook between my class and Mr. Marco's class, and we'll have science lab on Monday and Thursday. For PE, we have PE times almost every day, but they're a little bit different. It will take a couple weeks, and you can kind of talk to your kids about what kind of clothing makes sense for these. On Monday morning, we'll do PE challenges. That's just with our class, and it's a short way to kind of transition into the week. I don't imagine you'll need full PE clothes for that because it's short and it's in the morning, but we will sometimes be in the grass, and sometimes the grass can be wet, so you can think about footwear for Monday morning. Tuesday and Thursday are PE with the PE coach with all of 5th grade, and Friday, fun day, will be outside just playing. It's not exactly organized PE, but we'll also be out with the other 5th grade classes at that time. Part of our PE challenges that we'll do throughout the year include prepping for the 5th grade PE testing in March. So all 5th graders in the state of California do the PE testing. They run a mile for time. They do something called the trunk lift, which was they lay on their stomach and have to lift their chin up as high as possible. They do push-ups, curl-ups, which look like sit-ups, and then a flexibility test where they have to touch their fingers behind their back. So you can imagine one hand reaches back over your head and the other hand reaches around your back, and you have to touch your fingers like that on both sides. That's a flexibility test. We will practice the mile run throughout the year, and we'll build to it. So one of our PE challenges that happens on Monday morning every few weeks, maybe every like 6 weeks or 7 weeks or so, we'll do a mile run practice, and we'll build throughout the year. So there's a course that we can run here that's 6 laps to get to a mile. So you can imagine we'll start with 1 or 2 laps, and then move to 3 and 4 and 5, getting ready for the mile with the goal of just getting the best time possible. And the kids will also be tracking how that's going throughout the year as well. Projects. So in addition to all the academics, we'll do these other kind of standalone projects throughout the year. We're going to have an all-APIS project. We're going to do 2 of them, actually. We'll do a very short one at the start of the year, and then we'll do a bigger one at the very end of the year. For those of you that were, remember from last year, we invited you all to come look at the kids' designs for the new playground. As you can see, the new playground did not get redone this year. The timeline got moved back, which was news to us, but we'll have a new all-APIS project at the end of the year, and we'll have a very short one at the start of the year, so you'll hear more about that. We may do this other independent project called an If-Then Adventure Story. We'll make game boards. There's be a constellation project, some photography, possibly a speaker series. We're going to try to work on some pen pals, and there might be other projects. So any of those might disappear throughout the year or get replaced, but those are some of the projects we might do. You heard a little bit about Continental Mathematics League and National History Day. You might hear about Spelling Bee, Math Field Day, and Science Olympiad throughout the year. Another couple things we'll be working on every week is leadership and mentors. So in leadership, we're really going to take some time every Monday morning. When the kids come, they'll do our PE challenges. We'll come in and we'll talk about leadership. And really what it is a really structured way to talk about good habits that kids use and having the students make their own plan for using those habits. And it's also something we'll be able to talk about at conferences. How are we doing in these areas of leadership? Where are the weaknesses and where are the strengths? So these are the 7 habits we'll talk about. In different words, you're in charge might also be like, be proactive. Work first, then play. Listen before you talk is a great one for 5th graders. And everyone can win. Another great one too. So we'll take these idea of one of these habits. We'll read about a hero from the real world that used one of these habits to be successful. And then as a class, we'll discuss how we can incorporate this habit or the things that the hero did into our own life. For mentors, this will also happen every week. We're going to be partnered up with Miss Kim's 2nd grade students. And so you may have heard this before as buddies, but we're doing it a little bit different. The kids will act as mentors. Their little buddy, that will be someone they check in with every week. And they're really going to be more of a support role than like a friend role. So they will have check-in time to see how it's going throughout the week. They'll set goals and encourage their little buddy. They'll provide academic support, led by that student. So we're not having your 5th graders teach the 2nd graders, but the 2nd grader might ask, hey, I was really hoping for some help with learning some addition and subtraction. Like, can you help me? And so it'll be something like that. They'll talk about conflict resolution, and the 5th graders will help support 2nd graders when they get into conflicts and how to resolve those. And then, of course, they'll get to play and do some other projects throughout the year. This is going to be a really fun thing. I think that's going to be really valuable. So you can ask your students throughout the year, how's it going with their little buddy? What kinds of things are you guys talking about? Are you able to help them in any way? And I think they'd really be excited about that. Field trips. We're very excited to have some field trips this year. In October, we're going to go to the OCC Planetarium. We'll get shown around a little bit and also watch this video called To Worlds Beyond, and it matches with our science unit about looking at the stars. We'll have an on-site field trip about a printing press. So there's a place called the Printing Press Museum. They will actually come and do some presentations and demonstrations of printing press and talk about the importance of the printing press. And there'll also be someone who comes and talks about Benjamin Franklin and some of his inventions and big contributions. Also, we'll have an on-site field trip called Walk Through the American Revolution. The students have to use their knowledge of history and kind of act things out and play games, and it's a really fun experience. That will also happen in March, so you'll hear more from that. It's possible another field trip could pop up throughout the year. We have a couple of ideas, and we're on the wait list for one, so we'll just have to wait and see. But we'll have to see how it goes. And the very last day of school, there will be a pool party for all of 5th grade right at the pool next door to Santiago Hills. It's paid for by fundraising throughout the year. We think field trips are going to cost about $50 this year. I'll talk more about that back to school night, but just know that you'll be hearing from me about that, and that could change, but we're hoping to kind of get you what that number should be so you have an idea to plan ahead throughout the year. So like I said, that was so much information, but back to school night is on Thursday, August 31st from 6:40 to 7:20 in my classroom. I really hope to see you there. The information does not really overlap. This is kind of separate information that I wanted you to get. So I really hope to see you there on Thursday. All right. Bye-bye.